the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd. And well, would you look at that? 5 straight wins for your Philadelphia Union over New York City FC with Union's 2-1 victory Saturday night at Subaru Park. They go into the League's Cup break sitting in third place in the Eastern Conference with 40 points, which is 5 below where they were this point last season. But you got to admit, with the Gold Cup and how the road trip initially started with Atlanta and LA, then you go into Nashville, you get all 3 points there, you get all 3 points against New York City, 6 out of 12 possible points. You got to feel pretty happy with how things stand as Union fans. At least, I'm pretty happy with where the Union stand at this point, because it's interesting too, where you look, 23 games played so far, 23 games last year, the Union had 12 wins. And the only difference was the Union conceded a lot less goals last year at this point than they did right now. They're currently at 26 points conceded. Remember, last year they'd only given up 26 goals total in 34 games, so they're definitely not going to go the rest of their season conceding no goals. That would be fantastic if they did, but I don't think that is going to happen. And I think most fans would take the Union being in third place with 11 games to be played in MLS. And I think maybe some fans are a little bit upset that, we were better last year. We were blowing teams out by this point last year, and that really hasn't happened yet. Okay, I hear you. But here's the thing, right? 2-3 weeks ago, some of you guys, and maybe none of those people that complain about how the Union season was going listens to this podcast, but if you do, you guys were complaining about those 2 away trips in Atlanta and LA, like I said, where the Union looked horrible. And we talked about it on the podcast. Yeah, the Union did not look good. But that win in Nashville, that was huge. And you expect the Philadelphia Union to always win at home at Subaru Park. But that win in Nashville, that's huge. And Cincinnati, they seem like they're on pace to potentially set the all-time points record in the regular season. Currently at 51 points. First in the Supporters' Shield standing. Only 2 losses all season long. They're a good team. Pat Noonan's a fantastic coach. And that team, they love to leave it late. And give the fans heart attacks. Left it late against New York Red Bulls. And then when they had Nashville on Saturday, they made easy work of Nashville. And by the way, Nashville, again, 2 red cards in their game. So that's back-to-back games now where they've had 2 red cards in each of the last 2 games. And 2 former Union players as well for Nashville. Fafa Pico and Taylor Washington were the players that picked up red cards against Cincinnati. They're a team that's scuffling right now. And we talked about it. And we don't need to talk about it anymore, but that would be a completely different team if they had a number 9. And I guess it's kind of the same issues with New York City. Because I don't think New York City's bad. I think the scoreline was probably right in the Philadelphia Union New York City game. But the chances that New York were creating, if they had a proper number 9, they're probably finishing some of those chances, you would say. And I know New York City currently sitting in 13th place, and Jim Curtin joked during the press conference, he said, they're like Man City, well, except they're in 24th place in the standings overall. So had to get a dig in there on New York City. But I think you add a striker, this team's going to be right back in the playoff spot. They've only lost 8 games all season long. The Union have lost 7. Just New York City have a ton of draws. 11 won the season. And so you add that player that can put the ball in the back of the net. And yeah, why wouldn't New York City be climbing off the table? And I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the standings or not, but Chicago Fire are in a playoff spot. Chicago Fire. Kasper Schmeichel scoring the game-winning goal for Chicago this past weekend against Toronto in the 90th minute. So shout out to Kasper Schmeichel for helping the Fire move into a playoff spot. Now, will Chicago be there at the end of the season? That's to be determined. But the Fire have been playing really good soccer here as of late. 3-game winning streak against Nashville, Montreal, and Toronto. And they're a team that had started off extremely slow at home. Won the last 3 home games now. So they're a team for sure that could be pushing for a playoff spot. Shaqiri seems like he's finding his form. Brian Gutierrez, who I think is a fantastic midfielder, would not be shocked if he sold in the wintertime. Chicago Fire making noise. DC United holding on in 9th place. What will Inter-Miami do? I think I read that they need 9 out of 12 wins to get into the playoffs, to have a chance of getting into a playoff spot. You know, with Messi, you always feel like you have a chance, but only 18 points. It's tough. Tough task to climb for Inter-Miami. But yeah, MLS, I mean, this game, this league, it's so hard to predict. And why are we stalling for time, you might ask? It's because we have no clips. We have no sound bites for this podcast. So, I don't know, maybe we do go through the podcast within an hour. We shall see. But we do have news to talk about. We have, obviously, my thoughts on the Philadelphia Union New York City game. 3 stars, blown of the week. And I'm so glad that we're recording this podcast on a Tuesday afternoon because the Philadelphia Union blessed us with some news if you guys haven't seen it, which is how they typically do their business, right? They sign players that nobody's ever heard of. So we'll get into that. But without further ado, let's just get it straight into the news. All right, starting off with the easy stuff. New England Revolution and Toronto FC have agreed to trade Latif Blessing and Anthony-Kaye. Latif Blessing is headed to Toronto, while Anthony-Kaye is headed to New England. And it's a little bit of a surprise that Latif Blessing is getting traded by New England. Where you look, New England traded this year to get Latif from LAFC, and now they're trading him to Toronto, where Toronto last season traded with Colorado to get Anthony-Kaye, and they sent Ralph Priso the other way with some GAM. And now after a year, Anthony-Kaye is done in Toronto, but I do expect that whole team to kind of get blown up with Bob Bradley out, where they're eventually going to bring in a new sporting director, a new head coach, and they're going to want to put their footprints on that roster. So I would not be shocked if Toronto aren't done making moves. Speaking of making moves, Minnesota United have announced the signing of 21-year-old defender Ethan Bristow from English side Tranmere Rovers through the 2025 season with a club option for the 2026 season. And speaking of moves, we'll continue to just talk about all moves. And that is the Columbus Crew. They have announced that they have parted ways with goalkeeper Eloy Room. And this is not a surprise if you pay attention to Columbus at all. Wilfried Nancy came in and he wants a goalkeeper that's comfortable with his feet. And that is not Eloy Room. He'd only made 3 starts this season for the Crew. And they'd been going with Patrick Schulte, who is making a lot less than Eloy Room. Patrick Schulte is making a little over $103,000 on the season, while Eloy Room was the third highest paid goalkeeper in MLS with a salary of $898,000. And so the crew have parted ways with a really good shot stopper. But when you look, like I said, how Wafananse wants to play with the ball, once a goalkeeper is comfortable with the ball at their feet, Eloy Room did not fit the mold anymore in Columbus. And speaking of moves, because that's all this news segment is moves, just to keep you guys updated with the transfer window being open. Tom Bogert announces last week that Olivier Mbaizo has requested a transfer from the Philadelphia Union after visas for his wife and son have once again been denied. Mbaizo wants to play where his family can join. The Union understand but prefer to sell in the winter and not the summertime. And I feel for Mbaizo to not have his family here, just constantly trying to get his family into the country, and he continues to get denied. That's going to wear on you. And we saw the same thing happen with Jamiro Montero a couple of seasons ago. But it was a little bit of a shocker that the Union traded him in league to San Jose, and then San Jose were able to get Jamiro and his kids into the country. Why the Union can't, I'm not quite sure, but this is a reoccurring theme, it seems like, for the Union. And I know other teams around the league have similar issues, but I don't know. It seems like the last couple of years, it's been an issue with the Union, whether it's been getting visas for their own players or it's been trying to get visas for their players' families to come into the country. It's been difficult for the Union. And yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's tough. Mbaizo's a fantastic right back. I think I said this either on a goals breakdown video or on a podcast a couple weeks ago, that I'm comfortable with Nate Harriel if he did take the starting spot from Mbaizo. Nate's a fantastic defender, and we've always said, if he can get better offensively, then it's going to be his job. We saw Nate take the starting spot last season from Mbaizo, but to Olivier's credit, he worked hard and won that spot back. And so we'll see. Will something miraculously happen? Will his family finally get approved visas? Maybe. But I don't know. Just looking at the Union's track record, I would bet against it. So we'll see how much longer the Philadelphia Union have Olivier Mbaizo. And Ernston always says, if we sell players, we'll bring players in to replace them. And speaking of bringing in players, the Philadelphia Union have announced they've signed defender Olwethu Makhanya from Stellenbosch FC. This is the Philadelphia Union's first U22 initiative signing. And for fans that are unaware of what that term is, because I know there's a ton of MLS mechanisms, a U22 initiative signing is a young player that is age 22 and younger. MLS clubs can sign up to 3 young players to lucrative contracts at a reduced budget charge, decreasing the risks associated with acquiring or retaining players who are still approaching their prime. The rule provides enhanced opportunities for homegrown signings and super draft picks, as well as players who hail from outside the United States and Canada and are signing their first MLS contract. So basically how this works, like I said, MLS clubs can sign up to 3 players under the age of 22 to higher contracts that are going to be lower hits against the budget. And players can occupy the U22 initiative slot through the season they turn 25 years old. And so this is a signing that isn't really made for right now. I think that's pretty clear. I saw a lot of people on social media say, well, what's this mean for one of our center backs? Could the Philadelphia Union sell one of Jack Elliott, Jacob Glesnes, Damian Lowe? It's possible. It is possible. But at the same time, rotation's not a bad thing. Depth isn't a bad thing. Makhanya has first team playing experience. Now, granted, it's in South Africa, which is definitely below MLS. But at 19 years old, you're already playing first team soccer. That's really impressive. And you're adding a player, Ernst Tanner said, is extremely explosive. A player that fits their system, that can play in a back four or a back three. That his aggressive play style fits what the Union are all about. Will he get opportunities this season with the Union? It's possible. But I look at this signing more towards the future than I do right now. And if anything, it adds insurance to, okay, well, if one of your three center backs get hurt, ideally you don't play Nate or Kai Wagner as one of those three center backs if you want to play three center backs. You go out and sign a natural center back now. And Transfer Market has him listed as potentially playing right back too. I don't think this is the replacement for Olivier Mbaizo. You don't put a player that's 6'1" as a right back. And especially somebody that's still growing. I think it's funny that his nickname is The Tower because, yeah, at 19 years old, you sit 6'1". That's huge. And this kid's only going to get bigger. And so it's good to see the Union go out here and take advantage of something they've never taken advantage of before. Just like they've never had three DPs on their roster before. And it's a year first for the Philadelphia Union. So I don't have too many thoughts on this signing, especially coming from a league that I guarantee you every single person that listens to this podcast has never watched a day in their life. But you got to trust the scouting of Ernst Tanner and the Philadelphia Union that, this is a player that could potentially help right now. But more so than not, he's going to be a player that helps in the future. So, love to see the Philadelphia Union making moves. It's maybe not the striker that all of us want, but the window had just opened. There's still a little less than a month to go before the window closes again. So we'll see if the Union make any more signings. But these are the type of signings the Union are going to make. Players that we've never heard about. And moves aren't going to become official until the Union announce them. And people are like, well, where did this come from? So nice to see the Union take care of business and all those other MLS clubs that I talked about making business as well. But let's go ahead and talk about the Philadelphia Union versus New York City game. Like I said in the intro, we all know by now that game ended 2-1. And honestly, how many of you guys were nervous there in the last couple minutes of this game, right after New York City scored to make it 2-1? Because I know I was for a little bit. It was an endless amount of pressure that New York City was bringing. 73-27 possession to New York City once New York City scored to make it 2-1. Blake had that huge kick save in stoppage time on Gabby Pereira. And it was definitely nervy moments. Definitely nervy moments. But you know what? The Union survived. And they take all 3 points. Again, back-to-back seasons now that the Union have won the series against New York City. They do it in New York City. They do it at Subaru Park. Will these teams meet in the playoffs again? And will the Union have New York City's number once again? We shall see. But like I said in the intro, I don't know if that's something that you guys realized. That this is 5 straight wins over New York City in all competitions. And their last loss was that 2-1 defeat in 2021, the COVID game. And now this series is tied up between these two teams, 10-10 and 2, with 32 goals scored apiece. And it just seems like ever since that COVID game, the Union have had New York City's number. And something had to change up in New York City, where the Union, early on, cannot get results in that pitiful field that we call a soccer stadium. And now suddenly you feel confident when the Union go up to New York City. You don't fear New York City when they come to Subaru Park. Of course, these games are always close. They're always nail biters. But the Union always find a way to prevail, at least the last 5 games. And New York City fans, we'll talk about them here a little bit later, but you know they got a dread coming into Subaru Park. Last 3 times that they've done that, they've seen their team get whooped at Subaru Park. And they're probably thinking, well, maybe this is going to be the game. Maybe we're finally going to witness New York City finally winning in Subaru Park. And it wasn't this game. And I heard somebody after this game, they had said that, that was a boring game to them. And do I agree with that assessment? Probably not. Because I do feel like there are some people in this fan base, especially the newer fans, they're expecting the Union just to blow out opponents, and that's just not going to happen all the time. Maybe people think this was a boring game because the Union only had 5 shots total in this game, which is their fewest shots at home since last April against Montreal in a game that ended 1-1. But the difference was, in this game against New York City than last year against Montreal, the Union were clinical in their finishing. 2 out of their 3 shots on target resulted in goals. 39% of the Union shots on target result in goals this season, which is the 5th best percentage so far in MLS. This team's super clinical. Yeah, they have a lot of shots, and they have a lot of wasteful shots. But the way I always look at shots are, okay, that means that you're creating chances. And I look at a team like Chicago Fire. We talked about them in the beginning. They're currently in a playoff spot. They have one of the fewest amount of shots in MLS this season. I believe it's in the bottom 5. But the thing about Chicago Fire is they're almost at 50% of their shots being on target. And I think the number of shots on target, I think 45 or 46% of those shots that are on target are goals. And so Chicago may not be creating a ton of chances, but the chances they do create are on target. And those shots that are on target, more times than not, are going to be goals. And that's a team that, okay, if they stay hot, I don't think I'd want to play them in the playoffs. I said it. 3 straight games Chicago Fire have won. They're probably pissed that now MLS goes on a break for a month because of the League's Cup, because they found form. Not saying that they can't continue that form in League's Cup, but this is a team, want to keep going in MLS because they found ways to win. They're making the most of their chances that they create. And so to see the Union hit 39% of their shots that are on target, they result in goals. That's an excellent stat right there. And 2 out of 3 shots on target against New York City were goals. And so, is there anything to complain about from this game? Not really. I would say the only thing that I would complain about in this game is I thought the Union gave New York City too much time and space to cross the ball, particularly on the Union's left side of the field. That was an issue. You look at New York City's right back, Ilinic. He had 2 key crosses from that side of the field, and then you had Gabby Pereira had that cross into Jason, which resulted in the goal. And it's a little thing to mention. It's a little thing to complain about. But I do think it's a valid concern, and I think you guys would agree too. You guys can see what I'm talking about in the goals breakdown video that we released the day after the game, which I know, right? It's 2 times in a row that I've released the goals breakdown video before the podcast. What am I doing? More of you guys listen to the podcast than watching the goals breakdown video. YouTube.com/freekickpod. Always got to plug it. But it's just little things. You know, you want your fullbacks to close down that space and not allow crosses coming into the box. Now, the reason you go out and sign a player like Jacob Glesnes, Damian Lowe, is because those guys are really good in the air. And so you feel like, okay, if crosses come into the box, you're going to bet that your center backs are going to be able to clear that ball out and beat out the opposition's attackers. And more times than not, that happens, for sure. Damian Lowe, Jack Elliott, Jacob Glesnes, terrific in the air. Nate Harrell, you can throw him in there too. He's great in the air as well. And so, again, it might seem like I'm nitpicking, because I probably am. But that's the only thing I can think about from this game against New York City that would be a concern. Was the intensity level a concern? No. The Union 100% matched the intensity level that New York City brought in this game. I would say they probably even went above and beyond from the tempo that New York City tried to bring. Because we saw New York City possess a lot of this ball, try to tire the Union out with the ball. And the Union did a good job keeping their shape. They did a good job not coming out of position, containing their players. They did a good job. Unlike against Atlanta, against LA Galaxy, where at times both teams, just passed around the Union and made them look silly. And New York City's a team that loves the ball too. And the Union did a really good job just to keep their shape. And maybe part of that is because the players feel like they can trust Andre Blake more than Joe Bendick. Yeah, that's probably part of it. But I do think this team is starting to get more confident, trusting each other, just focusing on their job. Because if they focus on their jobs, then everybody else is going to focus on theirs. Another moment in this game that could potentially be a negative, but I think it's more of a positive. And again, we talked about this as well in the goals breakdown video, were transitions. Because on one hand, the Union did create a couple really good opportunities on the transition. They did a good job breaking down New York City's attack, and then they quickly transitioned from defense to offense. That's how the Union scored their first goal. It was a typical Philadelphia Union goal. They win the ball. It's one-touch passing, line-splitting passes. Now you play a long ball up top to Quinn Sullivan. Jose Martinez makes a late run into the box. Quinn Sullivan sees the run. Terrific finish by Jose Martinez, who, by the way, can you guys believe it? 2 goals this season for Jose Martinez. 2 goals. Fantastic finish by Jose Martinez there, and that was a fantastic counterattack goal by the Union. But at the same time, right, there were moments where Daniel Gazdag underhit the pass to Ua. Quinn Sullivan passed straight to a New York City player. Moments where Mikael Ua made a run and the pass never came. All right, there's the negative. But the Union, here's a positive, they broke down the New York City's attack. So that's a positive, right? That's a win for the defense. Now they're quickly moving the ball, trying to catch New York City on the counterattack. That's 100% a positive, right? So I think this game came down to what team could transition better. And on the night, that was 100% the Philadelphia Union. A positive that I think fans may not give credit to is Jim Curtin got all his subs right, in my opinion. Jesus Bueno was excellent, shutting down the attacks again, talking about transitioning from defense to offense. He had a play there in the second half where he found Quinn Sullivan, and then Quinn Sullivan's pass went to nobody, intercepted by New York City. Jesus Bueno had himself a game. Love the interchange between Jose, Jack McGlynn, and Jesus, where they would rotate from, all right, you'd see Jose and Jesus as the 8s, then Jack McGlynn would be the 6. You would see Jesus and Jose switching sides. One would go to the left, the other one would go to the right, then they'd switch it. Jack McGlynn sometimes would be on the right. So I think that did cause quite the confusion for New York City, not sure who they should track. And that's exactly what happened again, going back to the first goal. Saw the Union counterattack them. Jose Martinez was on the left side of the field. He's always on the right side of the field. And that's just good interchange. It's good communication between the three midfielders. And you could see that New York City really didn't have a plan to break that down, how to deal with that. I think New York City tried to deal with that a little bit by switching from their back 3 into a back 4 in the second half of this game. But we saw the Union get that second goal, a huge goal with Chris Donovan. And this is a kid that has got a lot of hate from Union fans. And, he is what he is, but he showed exactly why you never give up on a play. And now my hope is that this doesn't convince the Union, all right, well, Chris Donovan scored. We don't need to go out and buy a striker. I hope that's not the case. I remember a couple press conferences ago, this is maybe a month and a half, 2 months ago, and Jim said that he believes that Chris is a late bloomer, that he will turn good. And I think we are seeing a little bit of that because, right, the Union don't take players that played in college. And we've seen them now a couple times now, signing players from college for Union 2. And Chris Donovan impressed so much with Union 2, the Union gave him a contract with the first team. And so I hope that Chris Donovan continues to develop how the Union want him to develop. But at the same time, this team still needs a striker. We talked earlier about signing a U22 initiative player. You have 2 more spots. Why not go out and sign another U22 player? Why not let it be a striker and then a midfielder? And now you have technically 6 DPs on the roster. That would definitely be a first for the Philadelphia Union. And maybe that happens. Maybe it does. Maybe it doesn't. But it is nice to see Chris hustle and keep that play alive. And he never gave up on it. And yes, New York City should have done better between Tavon Gray and the goalkeeper. But Chris Donovan never gave up on the play. And that's a huge goal after the Union, a couple minutes later, gave up a goal. And now it's 2-1 and you feel like it's game on. But that's pretty much my thoughts on this game. Nothing else I really want to bring up. Maybe I missed something that I should have brought up that you guys are like, hey, Todd, bring that up. If I missed something, I apologize. But I think that pretty much has it all covered. Jim Curtin said after the game that Ale Bedoya's injury is, again, another quad injury, that he believes it's going to be similar to his last quad injury, so about a month. And I guess it's a good thing now that MLS is off for a month. don't play Bedoya at all in Leagues Cup. Let him recover, and then by the time that MLS starts back up, Bedoya can go back out there. But yeah, let's go and talk about 3 stars, and then we'll go to Blender of the Week and end this podcast. So, number 3, Daniel Gazdag, 2 chances created, 4 passes into the final third, 2 out of 3 tackles won, 4 out of 7 ground duels won. And I would have put Daniel up higher than third if it wasn't for those mishit passes that he had in this game when the Union transition. A couple mishit passes to Mikel that I think Daniel would admit that, yeah, he would love to have them back. But this is what you want from your number 10. You want him creating those chances. And you want him to be that playmaker. I know he's more of a finisher than a traditional number 10, but we have seen the last couple weeks Daniel's creating more and more for this team. And that's good. That's good. That's what you want from your number 10. And Daniel's been doing a good job. You just want to see him hit those passes a little bit better. Number 2, Jacob Glesnes, 1 out of 2 tackles won, 4 interceptions, 4 ball recoveries. If you guys want to argue Jack Elliott, you 100% can. I just think Jacob was a little bit better on the night, especially when you look at his 4 interceptions. His reading of the game's terrific, and so is Jack Elliott's. I think that's what really sets these two apart compared to other MLS center backs, is that they read the game really well, especially Jack Elliott, who is a right-footed player, but you're playing him on the left. It's not natural for him to play over there, but it looks like he's been playing as a left center back his whole career. So, yeah, if you guys want to say Jack Elliott over Jacob Glesnes, I'm fine with that, but I do think Jacob had a terrific game for the Union. And then number 1 on the night, of course, who else than Jose Martinez? 1 goal, 11 passes into the final third, 1 out of 1 tackles won, 2 interceptions, 9 recoveries. Jim Curtin joked after the game and said, he's making a push for leading goal scorer this season. 2 goals on the year. But this guy does it all for the Union. Defensively, works his tail off. You're seeing him more and more get involved with the offense. Would love to see him play more of an 8. Maybe that's something the Union mess with in the League's Cup. But Jose Martinez, once again, had himself a game. And I feel like anytime we get a Jose Martinez goal, he should automatically be the first star on the night, right? But there is 3 stars, and now we'll go to Blender of the Week. And this is no surprise. That Blender of the Week is going to go to the Nashville fan for throwing something at Union players. But then I decided, let's not just throw the Nashville fans in here. Let's throw the New York City fans in here that were throwing stuff at Union fans. And then I said, you know what? Let's take it a step further. In all the people that throw things at entertainment venues, we've seen what? A trend, it feels like the last month, where singers on stage are getting hit by people in the crowd. They're throwing objects at them. I mean, what's gotten into people now? And then you have, like I said, the Nashville fans. They threw a drink at Daniel Gazdag. It hits Jack McGlynn after Gazdag scores a second penalty. And there's Nashville fans that were defending it. There were Nashville fans saying, you shouldn't celebrate in front of the supporters section. And my argument to that is, Hani Mukhtar did that in 2021. He celebrated literally right in front of me. I didn't throw anything. I booed him, of course. And nobody else around me threw anything. Of course, everybody booed him. And Hani does that every time he scores away from Geodris Park. And if he's facing the home team supporter section, he's always celebrating. And to Hani's credit, after that playoff game, he came back over to the Sons of Ben and Keystone State Ultras and applauded them, said, hey, good game. I thought I had the last laugh with scoring the opening goal, but hey, you guys beat us some penalties. Fair play to you. And he came over and showed us respect. We showed him respect and clapped him and applauded him and gave him a couple of FUs out of here, but we were respectful with not throwing anything. And I have no issue at all with players celebrating in front of the supporter section, I have no issues with that at all. But apparently Nashville fans did. And then you have the New York City fans throwing beers at Union fans in the family section. Apparently, security made a whole bunch of Union fans get out of their seats. Nothing happened, as far as I'm aware, to the New York City fans. I heard some people say after the Union scored their second goal that New York City fans were throwing things on the field at the Union players. From the press box, I couldn't see any of that. So maybe that happened, but I'm not quite sure. But I just don't understand this mindset of fans feeling like they need to throw things at players, at performers. Like, why? Why? Part of it is probably too much alcohol. It's probably a good majority of it. And if you can't handle your alcohol, then you probably shouldn't be drinking at all. I get emotions run high, but throwing things, that's never the answer. So the fans in Geodis Park, the fans that traveled down from New York that threw stuff, I hope they get punished. A ban should probably be in play if they can identify those fans, because that stuff has no belonging in our sport. And for the Nashville fans that are saying, oh, Union fans are crybabies, look what happens in Argentina and Brazil. I'm fully aware of how those people act. I'm fully aware of how people act in England. But does that make it right? Absolutely not. These people look like trash. And again, I get it. Emotions run high, but what does that say of you as a person that you can't control your emotions? It's not a good look. It's not a good look at all. And for the people that want to defend this, shame on you, shame on you. But that's pretty much it for the podcast. If you guys aren't following on social media still, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Free Kick Pod. The Free Kick is where you can find the podcast. YouTube.com/Free Kick Pod. What else am I forgetting to plug? I don't think anything. That's everything, right? And I told you guys, I really don't want to talk about Leagues Cup. We'll talk about it if fans come on here and want to talk about it, but I really don't care enough about this competition to make a review and preview episode. So this next month, I want to talk to you, the listeners, whether you've been on the podcast before, maybe you haven't been on the podcast in a very long time, maybe you've never been on the podcast. Reach out to me on social media. Would love to get you on. I think we have a podcast lined up for tomorrow, and that episode will be released either Thursday or Friday morning. And yes, I promise this time the episode will be released on one of those 2 days. But yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to talk to people that have never been on this podcast before, people that haven't been on the podcast in a very long time. We'll talk about the season. We'll talk about how you got into the Union, your expectations, the remainder of the season. If you want to talk about Leagues Cup, sure, we'll talk about Leagues Cup. But yeah, I want to get back to the roots, what started this podcast, which was bringing on fans. So if that's something you're interested in, hit me up on social media, at Free Kick Pod on all socials, at It's a Todd's Life is my personal. And you guys will definitely be able to find me on social, and I will get back to you guys and set up a date. But with that said, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.